In this project, I will show you my process for drawing a portrait in charcoal. This is a great project to help you master your tools and techniques for shading. So I'll go through my process for creating the portrait from start to finish, including the blending steps. And what you're gonna see in this video is a shortened version of a full-length demo that I have available to Artist Network members on artistnetwork.com. So if you're interested in learning more, go over to artistnetwork.com and see what it takes to become a member. In the description below, you'll find a link to the reference image as well as a list of materials, but I'll go over them here first. I work with cotton rag paper, so that's what I have here. I'm working with vine charcoal as well as 2 compressed charcoal pencils, a hard and a soft. For the erasers, I have a kneaded eraser and a rubber eraser carved down to a chisel tip. And for blending, I'll use 5 different tools: my hand, a paper towel, a tortilla stump, a blending stick, and a blending brush. So the first step in my process is to create what I call the gesture. Some people call it the block-in as well, but I like to use the side of my vine charcoal to rough in the basic shape of the head. This is a simple reaction to the form. So I'm not calculating, I'm not really thinking about measuring or anything like that. I'm simply reacting to the form and building up basic shapes of light and dark. And in this, I'm also thinking about the overall shape of light and shadow. So the dark areas that are in shadow, the light areas that are in light. And if I squint my eyes and blur my vision, it helps me to see those simple forms. So that's a lot of what I'm doing in this early stage. The other advantage of working with this gesture is that it gives us a foundation to build upon as we calculate and control those proportions. After the gesture, I use vine charcoal to go through angle sighting. And what this is my simple attempt to break down the shape of the head into short, straight segments. And I can use angle sighting at this stage, literally comparing the angle from the reference photo to the drawing. And as I work my way around the head, it starts to take on more specificity. And this step is really important for curved forms like this because it allows you to then arrive at a more complex and specific rounded shape. I'm also using plumb lines and horizontal guides. So for example, I'm looking at the relationship between the top of the head and the bottom of the chin. That's a vertical line there, and I can see how they relate to that vertical line. You can use a horizontal guide to compare the ear to the mouth, for example. So I'm looking across the form, both vertically and horizontally, to see where various features align. And finally, I use some comparative measuring. In this case, I think a great form to look at is the relationship between the width of the head from the ear to the cheekbone. Compare that to the height of the head from the chin vertically. And in this case, I can see that the width from the ear to the cheekbone is equivalent to the distance between the chin and about the middle of the forehead. At this stage, also, I'm going to rough in some of the basic shapes for the features, and I can apply that same thinking of using angle sighting and comparative measuring to rough in the basic shapes. After the measuring, I move into the refinement stage where I'm refining the shapes that I'm seeing emerge on the page. I'm using a harder compressed charcoal pencil here, and I like to use the side of it because it helps to build up a larger area at a time, and it keeps a sharper point to the charcoal. So I work from the center of my forms outward to try to apply another layer of specificity to the forms. So I'm thinking both in terms of the dark shadow shape on the head, so the form shadow of the head plus the cast shadow that's being cast onto the shoulder. And I'm also thinking about the negative space around the head. So if we look to the light side of the head, I can darken that area and refine that edge along there. And so in that way, you're thinking both additively and subtractively. And then the final step as you refine these larger shapes is to bring in an eraser and sharpen up some of those edges. In this case, I'll use that rubber eraser both on the light side of the head as well as the background along the shadow side. Now we start to blend. So inside the form, the blending step really helps to develop the form and light and shadow within the head. We're looking for the transitions from that light to shadow. The paper towel is a great first step to modeling the form. You can really kind of sculpt the form as you transition between the shadow and the light side. The brush is another effective tool to creating a smooth transition. And so I'm working around the head, looking at areas where the transition is harder and where it's softer. And I use a tortilla or a blending stump, either one could work here, to start to sculpt the features. With a tortilla that's well loaded with charcoal, it can work really effectively to creating some of the forms in the smaller areas like the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So I'm sculpting those features in this stage, looking in a smaller scale for the shape of the light and dark in these areas, using an eraser when I need to pull out some of those forms. And with that blending established, I move into the facial features. I'm going to finish them now. Still using the compressed charcoal, the harder one here, I look to refine those shapes even further. Again, looking at the transition from light and dark, building from the center of the form outward, removing areas with an eraser when I need to, and I'm looking more closely at the specific shapes. And it's helpful at this stage now to have had all of those earlier steps where I'm measuring and I'm placing those forms and I'm thinking about those larger areas first. And now I can really absorb myself in those finer details. One of the tricks that I like to use when I'm drawing eyelashes is to use the side of the pencil and carve away from the eyeball, looking closely at the direction of the eyelashes that I see in the reference image. And I apply that same thinking to the eyebrows as well, really using this long side, long edge of the charcoal and follow along the structure of the head in the direction that I see that the eyebrow is making in the reference image. In areas like the mouth, it's really helpful to try to, again, distinguish between light side and shadow side. And I can see that there's some variations in light and dark within the lips. And the key to drawing the lips is to really focus on the edges. The edges are often much softer than we think they are, and in particular around the corners of the mouth. So you can introduce your blending brush or tortilla as you're going through this to help you refine that even further. As I move down into the shadow forms along the chin and into the cheekbone, I'm, again, looking to provide more specificity there. And again, observing where those gradations are softer and smoother, for example, along the cheek. And then higher up on the cheekbone, it's a harder transition. It's not quite as diffused. Once that's done, I like to map out the shadow core. So in that shadow side, I like to see where is it the darkest. And you can start to see a path that moves through the cheek, up towards the cheekbone, along the temple and up into the hair, where it's slightly darker than the rest of the shadow. And that's where it's going to be the darkest. And so I might start by mapping out that line and then diffusing it a little farther as I go. I also refine areas like the hand and in the sweater, but I'm not going to bring them up to the same level of finish that I do with other areas of the drawing. And in the final step, I bring in the darkest charcoal, my soft charcoal pencil, to bring more depth into areas like the pupil, into the nostrils, and into the mouth, and then perhaps into the hair and some of the shadow side and the cheek to bring out additional depth. I hope you enjoyed this project and that you made it your own. If you want to keep going and add more details, more refinement, I think you're well positioned to do that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this project. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments below. If there are other projects that you'd like me to tackle, I'd love to hear those. And check out artistnetwork.com to become a member where you can watch the full-length video and get even greater detail into the steps that I take to complete the portrait.